Hey guys, it's Friday here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about the undead. Most people, when they think about the undead, the first thing that comes to their mind is zombies. And in terms of whether or not I believe in zombies, right off the top of my head, I would say no. Simply because um, I think it's so played up by Hollywood, it's hard to think that it is something that's real. Um, and even now, after doing some research about all this, I'm still kind of on the fence. I've always been the kind of person where just because I wasn't able to see something firsthand didn't necessarily mean it was true. For example, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, I sure as heck am not going to say that they aren't real simply because you look at things like the panda and the gorillas. For the longest time, people thought they were just folklore, and now they turn out to be actual, real, living, breathing things that we can go to a zoo and see. So who's to say that there isn't such thing as zombies just because it's not something I've experienced or seen before? So when I was doing my research on the zombie portion of the undead, I came across Max Brooks, and you may know him from his books, A Survival Guide to a Zombie Attack, and I believe the other one is called War Z, um, The Great Zombie War, something of that nature. I will put the title of his books up so that you guys can see them and check them out if you want to. I've only met one person. There was a guy that was in my unit who is really, really into zombies, and he read both of his books, and he really enjoyed them. Max had done a interview with Archaeology magazine, and as I was reading through it, there were some really interesting things that came up. According to Max, who considers himself a zombie expert and says that there are many or more out there like him, he says that zombie attacks are definitely not a new thing. He lists zombie attacks happening in Rome, um, in China, um, in India, dating as far back as 60,000 BC, all the way up to 1587 AD, which is if, the Roanoke, I believe it is Roanoke Island. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but it's in a it, the island is what now would be in modern day uh, South Carolina, I believe. Um, but many of us know the story from history class, and it is that there was a colony of thousands of men and women who were being left on this island in the New World, and they were left there for several years. When a supply ship came back with more supplies for them, they had just vanished. There was some carvings and a couple of trees um, of some words, some letters, but nobody knew what happened to them. And to this day, it's still argued exactly what happened to all these settlers and where they all could have gone to. A lot of people tend to say that it was the Native Americans in the area that came and killed them or took them away. But Max Brooks suggests that it was a zombie attack. And he gets this from looking at stories from a local tribe in the area that claimed that there was a part of the woods that was near the settlement that was considered evil. It was off limits. You weren't supposed to go there. And apparently, some of the settlers had gone into this area to go hunting. Several men came back claiming that some mad Indians had come out of the woods and had attacked them and actually started eating some of their people. Um, Eventually, these people came back, and as the zombie stories go, they're reanimated, killed the rest of the settlers on the island, and then it is thought that since they were contained on this little island and were basically out of flesh to eat, that they it eventually just died off and they decomposed back in the earth. The other idea is that the neighboring tribe that knew what was going on because of their folklore came over, had this big war with the undead settlers, chopped off their heads and burned their bodies. Max says that it is very likely when doing an archaeological dig that if you come across the skeleton or the body of an individual that has no head, it is very likely that they were a zombie that was killed, or if there is some kind of large head trauma, that it's a possibility that could be hinting at it. Max also believes that it is very important for us to be aware of global warming in the case that if there are zombies that are frozen, they can become reanimated again once they thaw out. It was a really interesting article interview with him. It's kind of hard to go over all of the things that he said in such a short amount of time. So I'll leave the link for you guys so you can check it out and read it yourself. It was kind of interesting, especially being in such a major magazine as archaeology. So check it out. It was actually a pretty interesting read. As far as mummies go, which I don't think anyone has covered yet this week, we all know that mummies are the embalmed bodies of the deceased. The way that they went about embalming the body was basically a drying process. And this would be done by first taking all the organs out of the body, except for the heart and kidney. I'm not quite sure why the kidney was not removed, but I know the heart was removed because it believed that the heart did all the thinking. Um, but once that process was done, the body was then rubbed down with salt to speed up the drying process, along with covered in sawdust. A lot of times it was massaged to keep the body looking very supple and keep its form really nicely. Um, and then it was stuffed and perfumed and everything, and they would keep them in very close, form-fitting caskets to speed up and enhance the drying process. Mummification was thought to bring the individual into an afterlife. This is why you would see many of the Egyptian tombs filled with jewels and gold and servants and wives and everything, because it was believed that these people, pharaohs, whoever it may be, could bring these things into along their spiritual path. It's believed that something like 70 million individuals had been mummified before mummification became extinct or illegal in places like Egypt. And the reason why became illegal is thought to be because of the rise of Christianity. Embalming someone, or the art of mummification, was considered pagan, and therefore um, was outlawed. It was thought that bodies should return to the earth or return to dust in which they came from. Back then, it was actually believed that mummies held a special magical power. Actually, some grave robbers would go in, remove the body from the tomb, and would actually grind up the body to create a magical mummy powder. The legend of the mummy really became mainstream when Lord Carnarvon discovered the tomb of King Tut. It was shortly after this discovery that he died. He was bit on the cheek by a mosquito. As he was shaving the next morning, he aggravated it more and eventually became infected, and he died from it. The interesting thing about his death is the moment that Lord Carnarvon, sorry, I know I'm probably saying his name wrong, but the moment that the Lord died, all the lights in Cairo just went off. There was some power surge or something, and it was completely black. Of course, the media went wild with this news of the Lord's death, especially after discovering or pulling out King Tut. And a couple of big stories came out. The two biggest ones being that the man who first discovered the tomb, a snake killed his canary. I'm not quite sure the significance of that, but it was apparently a big deal. The other one was that the Lord's dog stood up, howled, and dropped dead at the same time as his master. So it was believed that King Tut was coming back from the dead and seeking vengeance on these individuals who had disturbed his rest. I know my video is getting kind of long, so I just want to run over vampires really, really quick. I'm not really going to go into the history of them or anything like that, because everyone else this week has already done a pretty good job with it. I'm just going to say that I definitely do believe they exist. I don't believe it is the ideas that the media puts through in the movies and everything of vampires, whether it be Dracula or whether it be Twilight series or anything like that. I believe that there are individuals out there that consider themselves vampires, whether or not they're dead or undead, or they were bitten by somebody and it made them a vampire, is their own freaking thing. I know that there are people out there that drink blood. I know that there are people out there that are psychic energy vampires. And so I'm certainly not going to try to disprove them, because, I mean, there are these groups out there and these conventions where they all get together and they do their thing. And so I do believe that vampires exist. They're out walking around with us in our everyday lives. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much into vampires, simply because this is getting very long now and I don't want to go over my time. A wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys next week.